But listen, thank you really for joining us. And the reason why I say that, for me, this is a very special session. This is what you are seeing are the makers of New India. And this is the story of New India. You know, I remember, and Ma'am Aksha, you have actually also been so supportive in creating all this for us. And I remember 16 January 2016, the Prime Minister was walking up to the podium and he was going to launch Startup India. So what, we're just 74 months away from it. And just after we finished that, somebody from the press asked me, when will you believe you've been successful as a startup nation? And I said, the day an Indian mother is okay with her daughter marrying a startup person. And I think we are quite there. I mean, all of you, full points to you. Sumant, it happened with you before you were a startup. But, but I must tell you, we are right up there. It's an amazing story. You know, the secretary mentioned to you about the third largest system. I remember when we launched it on 16 January 2016, we had about 450 startups in India. Today, 88,000 plus. And I'll tell you the good part of that. India is divided, well, not divided, but there are administrative areas which are called districts. And we have over 775 of them. When you think of startup in India, you think of Bangalore. Well, let me tell you the story. Today, over 680 of those districts have a registered startup in India. The story of New India is bottom up. It's no longer top down. These are the gentlemen which will tell you about that. The second interesting part of this story. For the first time in human economic history, a brand new company got 100 million new customers in 180 days. It's not just that big opportunity which India offers. Today, and the digitization, which is what the secretary mentioned to you, the ability to access that opportunity. In fact, in the midst of the lockdown, and when you were saying, sir, that how are we the third largest ecosystem, we are number 3 in the world in number of unicorns. We are number 2 in the world in number of startups. We are number 1 in the world with new startups adding every day. I have close to 100 startups adding every day. All a story in what? 84 months. You see how fast India is changing. In the midst of the lockdown in 2020, we added a startup every 26 days. In the midst of the lockdown in 2021, we added a startup every 9 days.
No, unicorn.
Unicorns, sorry.
Not the startup.
Unicorns. I told you, this story has only just begun. And today you have the protagonists of these stories to tell you where it is headed. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll just add one more sentence. You talked about mother agreeing to marry the daughter to a startup. We are also inclusive in gender-wise. 50% of the startups have a women director, so it could be other way around also.
Always ready.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Bagla, MD and CEO Invest India. We also have Mr. Sumant Sinha, Chairman and CEO Renew Power. Sir, you were the first unicorn in the energy sector. Until now, even when we have around 108 unicorns, we have only 2 unicorns from this sector. So this tells us how difficult this space is. We wanted to hear 2 things from you. One, how your journey has been so far in the energy space. And so secondly, going forward, what are your plans of diversification with respect to, one, now energy markets opening up, we have a green hydrogen mission which got approval from the cabinet, and also secondly, in respect of the geographical market expansion, sir.
Thank you so much. So you've asked me for my life's history and for all my future strategy as well. So this can take the whole session. So I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. Look, I think that just to echo the words of Mr. Jain and Mr. Bagla, the reality of India has changed. I think it's very clear that that if you talk to any young person in India, the preferred path for them after finishing college is not to now join any company or the other, but it is actually to do their own startups. I think that's become very clear now. And you talk to the brightest guys coming out of the IITs, the IIMs, the other top colleges in India, and the best guys decide, we want to sort of get our own startup done. And there are 2, 3 reasons why this has happened. I think one is the fact that India has grown dramatically in a whole bunch of new sectors which did not exist earlier. And therefore, that has allowed new people to come in and start companies because they were just new sectors. And so therefore, there wasn't any established or entrenched competition in those areas. The second thing that has happened also is that capital has now become freely available, both on the seed side, venture side, private equity side. And so people now have the ability of scaling themselves up all the way through the value chain and so on. And thirdly, all said and done, India is a huge, big market. And therefore, I think it's really attracting now a lot of people to stay back in India and pursue their own dreams and ambitions rather than just go out into some other job or work for somebody else. So I think all of these things are really making the whole startup environment and ecosystem a lot stronger and more profound than it was earlier. And so the numbers that you quoted, Deepak, I think those are just going to keep increasing and increasing and increasing as we go forward. And the best thing is, from my perspective, is that, as you rightly said, this is really going to democratize the business in India. And it's going to make it much more broad-based. And that's, I think, going to be really, really positive. Now, you asked me questions about my journey and why there are only 2 or 3 unicorns in our space. Is because our space is a very capital-intensive space. And a lot of companies are actually getting sold as they are growing as well. And so, therefore, they are creating value. But they're not necessarily staying as independent companies. They are selling out to other people and so on. So I would say that value is being created by startups in our sector. It's just that they're not independent companies that continue. They are getting acquired by some of the larger companies that are coming in. So I don't think it's in any way a negative. I think the opportunities clearly in the energy sector are very much there. It is just the nature of the growth of companies in our sector is a little bit different. As far as my experience is concerned, ours is an infrastructure sector. And I think if you talk to the other 5 or 6 startup people here, they'll all be in the IT sector or the digital space, which is a very different space from ours. And I just wish that there would be more companies coming in to the hard economy sectors, the old bricks and mortar sectors, because the reality is that while the startup or the digital economy of India has to be built, I think we've done a terrific job in sort of getting that advanced quite far in India's evolution. But I think the physical infrastructure part also has to catch up. And so there's a lot of building in India that has to be done. And building of buildings, building of roads, building of ports, building of energy infrastructure, building of everything to do with just the physical infrastructure part of it. And I wish, therefore, that more startups got into the kinds of things that we are doing. And hopefully that, for the ones that are in the renewable energy space, in some ways have demonstrated that this can be done even if you don't come from an established conglomerate or old company type environment. You can start new companies even in this space of hard building of infrastructure and move forward. So I think that is something I really wish more entrepreneurs would also think about doing rather than go immediately into the digital side of things. And so therefore our job has been in some ways path-breaking, has been difficult, but I think now we've established in some ways a roadmap for people to go down this path. And I would say that the entire ecosystem of people that have been working with us or that we've been working with, whether it's government policy makers, whether it's lenders, whether it's private equity guys, have all been actually very supportive in this whole journey. They've not said, oh, who are you? You're a standalone single individual. How can you get this done? Some of those questions were asked in the beginning, but I think overall now there's a very high acceptability of opportunities and people like us doing and creating standalone businesses in our sector. I think as far as our future is concerned, just to sort of move on a little bit faster, look, we are now at a point where we are the largest renewable energy company in India. We have almost a 10% market share. We generated 1.5% of India's entire electricity production last year. We helped avoid 0.5% of India's entire carbon emissions last year. And so we are very well positioned as far as growth in the Indian market is concerned. And of course, with green hydrogen coming up, we will sort of move into that direction as well. I think one of the challenges for us is how do we take a lot of this expertise that we now have and should we in fact think about taking this expertise to outside of India as well? And can we start looking at creating a more global company out of India, with its roots in India, with its expertise coming from India, but really then addressing global challenges? And the reason for that is that our sector is really evolving right now, right in front of our eyes. Everything is happening and we're right at the cutting edge of it. Nobody anywhere in the world is further ahead of us in this sector compared to where we are right now. And so therefore, that's an incredible opportunity for us. So we can continue to focus on just doing India, which of course we will continue to do, and make sure that we continue to keep, move forward on our responsibility to develop our own country. But at the same time, can we not create a true global champion coming out of India? We're already the 10th largest company as far as wind and solar is concerned globally, ex-China. So we have the heft. Now the question is only, does our ambition sort of support that? Does the capital raising support that? Can we build the organization fast enough? Because one of the things most entrepreneurs, I think, tend to focus less on is that along with building the business, you have to build the organization with new capabilities and so on. And unless you have that, and if you don't build your organization at least 2 years, 3 years ahead of your business, you will never be able to get there. So I think that those are some of the challenges that we are facing right now. But thank you. Let me pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha. We'd like to know more about it, probably with respect to the green hydrogen mission, maybe informally later, post the chat. We would now like to hear from an investor perspective as to how investors and funds see India as an entrepreneurial destination. We have Mr. Shailendra Singh, MD, Sequoia Capital. Mr. Shailendra, one, obviously, India as an entrepreneurial destination. And secondly, we also wanted to hear, because we have some of your portfolio companies also with us on the panel, that what besides helping them achieve the top line and funding, do you support in strategic investment and development of a company for sustainable growth, obviously?
Survi, thank you. Everybody, very honored to be here. First, a quick context. Just this week, 17 years ago, I started my VC journey in India. So started in January of 2006, 10 years before the start of India Initiative Born. Actually, the first 5-10 years were tough. There was high friction. The year I started in VC in India, the total digital advertising market, all of India's market, was $39 million. Okay, that year. This year, there are several billion-dollar individual companies like Google and Facebook. They have billion-dollar plus revenues each, and 7 billion plus in digital advertising revenue. So when you look at a long enough time period, it's a staggering evolution of India's startup ecosystem, when you look at the past 16, 17 years. And obviously, it got massively accelerated in the last 6-7 years after 2016, with all the incredible efforts of Startup India and Invest India and so on. And we couldn't be more thrilled with how fast things have developed, especially in the last 6-7 years. But having the privilege to be a part of the ecosystem for this long and seeing companies grow up, seeing our own business evolve, we couldn't be more bullish with how well we are positioned today relative to other markets around the world. And actually, it's pretty interesting how it's still so early days, in India and Southeast Asia, but specifically in India, in terms of development of the tech ecosystem. I actually think the one metric we didn't discuss yet, which is even more appealing to us, which is a leading indicator of the innovation potential, is how many software engineers India has. So like, for example, on GitHub, engineers from India have the most number of now, commits, code commits, or, contributions. And so India's contribution to global open source software, or, this software power that India has, is going to keep spurring innovation, at a very, very rapid clip. And I think we will now see, looking forward the next, 5-10 years, I think we will see multiple $100 billion companies. So if you looked around the world and looked at the US or looked at China, the largest companies are tech companies. And India is yet, we haven't seen that yet. The largest companies are not yet tech companies. And so, I was at an event a few months ago and they were like, hey, make a prediction. We want you to make a prediction. Like, nobody can make a prediction for the future. But I said, look, if forced to make a prediction, I would say, 1/3 to a half of India's top 100 companies, public listed companies, are going to be tech companies. Startups of today, which I think Startup India is grooming and Invest India is grooming, and so many different institutions are helping groom. And I think we're still in that journey where only in the last 2 years, we've seen the first few IPOs. So we've had a few companies go public. And I think there'll be several dozen more companies. We have many that have already filed for IPOs in the future, several dozen more companies going public. And actually the thing that's most interesting to us is this journey from a young, innovative startup to an enduring public company, which can generate free cash flow, which can have great governance. And I think it's that journey that hopefully ourselves and our other colleagues in the ecosystem, other VCs and all that, we can play a small part, to try to help companies, like you mentioned, this idea of org building, bringing world-class capabilities, the most important of which is talent, to bring world-class talent to companies, design a good org, build good governance. I think that's the journey now that, in my opinion, startup ecosystem is already on a different trajectory, where now the question is not do we have potential, the question is how will we convert our potential, which is evident in the unicorns, into these 107 companies and hopefully many more when they become public entities and their stock can be bought by the common Indian. I think that's when we will really achieve the next level of broader participation. And then I think both of the stuff you guys were mentioning about, all the daughters getting married or the sons getting married, I think then it will become really very seamless. But those are just my few thoughts, and I'm happy to take more questions or talk to people outside.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. We next have a very young and new unicorn founder, Mr. Bhavin Pandya, co-founder and CEO of Games 24/7. Welcome, Bhavin. Bhavin, in gaming space, unicorns have been a new addition. So we wanted to hear from you, one, what brings you to Davos? And secondly, if you could give some insights about your journey and some key highlights for the young entrepreneurs sitting in the audience.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Surbi. Yeah, and thank you for having me. Honored to be on this panel. So just before I start, Surbi, I want to correct one thing you said. Young? No, not so much. I'm not that young. New unicorn, yes, and I'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we meant young unicorn.
Yeah, okay. Hard, of course. But I'll talk a little about the young point. When I came, and I didn't know that Sharon started his journey in early 2006, that's when I incidentally started my entrepreneurship journey in India. And someone asked me, what are you doing, right? And I said, I'm going to do a startup in India. And their instinctive response was, start what? The word startup was not known in India in 2006, right? So just imagine the distance we've come through with all the big numbers from 400-500 startups in 2016 just to over 85,000 now. Really come a long way. But I'll talk a little bit about my journey and just to answer some of Surbi's questions. So yeah, this is better. Wow, I can hear myself more clearly. So when we started out, and of course, we started out at a time when entrepreneurship was not in vogue. There were not too many entrepreneurs. In fact, the BPO sector, some of you may remember, which seems like 100 years ago now, was really taking off in a big way. Companies were shuttling air-conditioned buses, had air-conditioned offices, and a lot of stuff was happening that no one really wanted to work for a startup. So just from 2006, we launched our product, in fact, 3 years after we said that we wanted to do this, right? And today, in 3 years, any startup would be dead if they're not doing anything meaningful, right? In fact, in 3 months, they would be dead if they're not doing anything meaningful. And so we're Games 24/7. We're India's largest online multi-gaming company. And our thinking was very, very simple. From day one, we focused on building game-playing experiences for players in India who'd played games growing up, but now just didn't have the chance to play them, right? That coupled with the fact that we were very scientific in our thinking, because we thought that it was really at the crossroads of science and entertainment that you could produce awesome game-playing experiences. And we call that the science of gaming internally, but that means that we measure everything we do. We're very analytical in our approach, right? And from day one, unit economics were extremely important to us. We did not grow at any cost, or we did not have the growth at any cost mentality. What that resulted in, and not a lot of people know this, but in 2 years of going live, we were already profitable. And we've been profitable for the last 12, 13 years, which is, while we have a lot of unicorns and we have a lot of, startups doing well, I think the next thing people are chasing is sustainability, something that we hear about a lot here, profitability, right? And so we've been experiencing that for many years now. Now I'm going to answer a question that Surbi asked about, but there are very few unicorns from the gaming space in India because online gaming is really talked about right now. Why are there such few unicorns, right, from India? There are only 4, maybe 5. And the reason for that is, and that has changed a lot in the last year, I'm very happy to report, but the reason for that was the space was unregulated. Online gaming really did not have a ministry that they could go to and say that, look, these are our concerns, these are some of the things we would like addressed. It was really like an orphan child in some sense. But I'm very happy to report that just 3 months ago or 2 months ago, the government of India said that, look, online gaming is growing in a big way. We have to put a concerted effort behind it. And METI, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, became the ministry for online gaming under the able leadership of the Honorable Minister of State, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar. Today, he held a session with a lot of stakeholders from the space to discuss the draft rules that were put out. Now, I must share something with you that the first time he met us was in June of 2022. And in December of 2022, draft rules were out. It is never in the history of India that in 6 months a new industry has moved so rapidly. Just goes to show you how much the government is doing, how much our country is thinking about startups, entrepreneurs, and producing really high quality talent in the country. Now, this is all also only possible if the public responds. And they have responded in a beautiful way. Right? Think about all the skilled people that you have in the country right now who want to grow up and want to do their own startups. They're responding so well to some of the initiatives that we as a people are taking, as the government is taking, and our hope is that this support will continue. The macroeconomic stability that we have is really contributing to this. The ease of doing business because of all the initiatives the wonderful people here have taken. Even on, to address a point that Mrs. Singh made, Mrs. Sinha made, even on the point of brick and mortar companies, right? The government is doing a lot to sort of provide, production-led incentives where there are a lot of these schemes that are helping people who are actually producing stuff to benefit from that. So overall, I think this is a great time to be in India, to invest in India, to do a startup in India, and once again, thank you very much for this opportunity to share this with you.
Thanks, Bhavin. We next have Nimrit Parekh, CEO Apna. Nimrit, you have been a serial entrepreneur, and now you are working into network effect businesses, trying to bring in a change, social change with the ubiquitous technology that you utilize to create HR tech platforms. So we wanted to hear from you more about some network effect business experience.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. And totally echo with Bhavin, and with everyone saying, apna time aa gaya. So let me talk a bit about Apna. So Apna, we are India's biggest jobs and professional networking platform for the rising working force. We have north of 30 million users and 400,000 employers which are hiring through us. Talking about network effects, let me just simplify network effects, right? Say at any point of time, if you add any user to your product, and if it makes the existing user's life better, that means you're building a network effect business. For example, we are in Davos currently. Every time a new Uber driver gets added to Davos, what happens on the rider side is now Ubers will get more cheaper, the wait times will go lesser, so we will get more riders, so more drivers will get more rides, and that kind of creates a kind of fulfilling prophecy. So now let me talk about on the network effects, let me talk about 2 things which we applied at Apna. First is, see, as a startup, you don't have a lot of resources when you start. So how do you go and build a network? And what we did is figure out what is the smallest stable unit of a network. In 5th standard, we had this concept of LCM, lowest common multiple. So for us, it is a job intersection, that is a city intersection category. So we started with, say, in carpenters, we want to go and win Mumbai. Or say in plumbers, we want to go and win Delhi. That is how we started it. And that is why I think so where we did well, because rather than finding, say, getting 10 jobs across 15 cities, across 15 categories, we said one category, one city, and just go and win that city. The second thing is that how do you once build a stable unit of network, how do you multiply it at scale? And how do you go and build a playbook around it? For example, the first city we launched was Mumbai. And it took us 6 months to be a leading marketplace in Mumbai. The second city we launched was Delhi. It took us 2 months. After that, third city, it took us 1 week, and now we are launching city in 6 hours. So what makes it better is every new user you add or every new company you add, it just makes the networks better. So let me give one example. Say when we started Mumbai, if we got, say you need, say 10 employers to start a network effect. Now when you launch Delhi, maybe 5 out of these 10 employers are already existing in Delhi. So now I have to only acquire 5. And then when I launch Kolkata, because of Mumbai and Delhi, I have to only acquire 2 new employers because the rest will come with me. So that just makes the cycles better, and that also kind of builds a great moat.
Thank you so much, Namrat. We have next Mr. Anuj Srivastav, CEO LiveSpace. Anuj, your LinkedIn profile is very interesting, and it reads you are a founder, creator, angel investor, and a Googler. Tell us about your journey and how do you identify as a founder as well as an angel investor. Also, Anuj, I wanted to talk about that there are very few unicorn startups that reach Series F and G funding. So if you could tell us more about your funding cycle and your way forward with respect to this.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody, for having us over. Such an honor to be on the panel. So stoked, actually, and overwhelmed. I think my journey, and as you can tell by my and actually started in India. So I was made in India, but bred in the Valley. So I was fortunate to actually experience, I went to an IIT and then left the country relatively early, and was very lucky to actually experience the construction of the Silicon Valley in the core sort of internet era. So I worked for Google and YouTube, and in the core sort of formative years between sort of 6, 7, all the way to 15, and just saw the evolution of a great sustainable institution which has a culture of innovation, but just a culture of leadership and culture of responsibility and so forth and so on. So that really inspired me, and I think, cut to about 2015, 16, when I was actually thinking about potentially changing my jobs and, going to an Instagram or an Uber, good luck and good wisdom prevailed, or bad luck and bad wisdom prevailed. And then I actually started looking at, coming back to India, because I really didn't want to be one of those Valley professionals who actually saw the great evolution of India and actually celebrated it from afar. So thank you to the two of you and to everybody here and to India for actually such a fantastic job. And and I think, sort of a step back, I think I really learned and was finessed in the art of, I think, understanding innovation and understanding the sort of 0 to 1 scaling journey and scale-up journey. How do you build a culture of sustainable scaling? And that's what sort of Google was known for. And through a series of, few successful and lots of not so successful experiences, my journey actually taught me that 3 or 4 things are vital, right? So deep respect for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, right? So how is it that you can actually work for the best, invest in some, hopefully if you're lucky, become one. So I was very fortunate that in my journey at Google, I started investing as an angel in the US, and was lucky to sort of see the evolution of some very successful companies, and followed that along in India, Southeast Asia, and so forth and so on. Startup investing is, I take it with a lot of responsibility and humility and luck. And with my co-founder, R.K. Ramakant, who's a very successful serial entrepreneur, we sort of run our own early stage platforms. And we've been very lucky to sort of partner with fantastic entrepreneurs and sort of learn with them. But I think that journey, while working for iconic entrepreneurs and investing in some of them, actually gave us a little spark of hope that maybe we could become one. So I think inspired by that, we founded LiveSpace in 2015 and scaled it out of Bangalore in India. Complex idea. In a very large TAM, we are today India's largest, most trusted platform and brand in an extremely large, though fragmented, home interiors and renovation space. And one point that I want to make is that, and I think a bunch of people talked about that, I forever wanted to build my company wherein I make it in India, but I make it for the world. So I think we are very lucky that, and probably one of the very few companies that actually already in a short period of time have, I think, 30 to 35% of our business now coming out of India. And the story that we've created in India today, the playbook that we're replicating in India, is likely going to create like an iconic company, which I'm very proud that I could come back and build out of India.
Thank you, Anuj. Last but not the least, we have Mayank Singhal, Chief Investment Officer, 10x ED. Mayank, you have an Abu Dhabi-based fund which is actively investing in India. So please tell us, how do you look at India as an investment destination, one, and what are your expansion plans in India?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. For context, as Surbhi said, I've spent the last several years investing Middle Eastern capital in India, predominantly in technology companies, including Flipkart, Byju's, Dream11, and a few others. It's been a fascinating journey, I think, seeing India from the outside and recognizing how, on a relative basis, India is so much attractive compared to several other markets globally. I remember several conversations in the last few months where people back home talk about two bright spots in the world: the Middle East, because there's excess capital with everything going on and crude pricing, and India because there's a ton of opportunity in very early days in terms of the tailwinds that you can see for businesses to become extremely large, and a real recognition that all the foundational stuff is now in place. I remember about 15 years ago, when I was at Temasek, we invested in the early days in Zomato and InfoEdge. Like Shailendra said, there were literally two companies that were listed on the markets. One was Make My Trip, the other was InfoEdge. And the combined market cap was piddly compared to what we saw in China and the US and several other markets. So it's definitely come a very long way. I think for us, we like India for a few reasons, to your question. We find that the combination of four factors, one being talent, which doesn't, at least in our definition, mean just the availability of software engineers or techies, but also the mindset and the DNA, where a lot of people are very excited to go build stuff and don't necessarily have a problem with failing once, twice, thrice, right? That culture, I think, has really permeated now compared to 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I think the success of founders like this has inspired many other people to know and to recognize that you can fail and be successful. Everything does go through sort of ups and downs. I think the second piece of it is really the regulatory piece, the government support. I think a contra example of the importance of the government support system is China. If you look at what's happened in the last 18 months, the tech sector is decimated, mostly because one person decided that the government doesn't need to be and want to be very supportive, and that's obviously worked to India's advantage. I think the third piece of it, obviously, as we mentioned, is the very large consumer base, and I think it's interesting to see that when you look at pockets in the world, there's very few where you can find the combination of these three factors working together, coupled with the supply of capital from several investors that love the market. But I think most importantly, what India offers is a ton of friction and a ton of pain points that can be solved for. So that makes it a great market for a founder or an entrepreneur. We spoke about a lot of factors that have contributed to success. I think geo has been a big factor, which I don't think we recognized on this panel. I think the availability of just fast, better, cheaper internet on the mobile phone has made it very, very interesting for several businesses, whether it's gaming, content, etc. And in fact, in addition to what Secretary Jain said about nobody showing up at government offices now to get a job or a recommendation, and what Mr. Bagla said about just the marriages in the startup ecosystem, I think there's one other factor, at least, that's important for me, which is the grandmom factor. My grandmom's about 92, and she orders online, she does video calls with us online, she lives her life on the phone, which tells you a little about just how permeated digital is across everyone's kind of life and livelihood. So that all of that together, I think, makes us very excited about India. Our focus has been software and consumer internet, and I think it's rather simple and very obvious that software, just given that India works out to be a great base in terms of cost and expertise, like Shailendra said, I think there's a massive runway for great software businesses to emerge out of India on a continued basis across several verticals. On the consumer internet side, I think the story has just begun. Even though we talk about massive successes like LiftSpace and Flipkart and many others, I think there's a long way to go and many different sort of problems and sectors to be focused on and solved for. So we're very bullish on India and very happy to talk about it more offline.
Thank you, Mayank. With that, we come to an end of our panel. Thank you, one and all, for your valuable time and insights. I am sure all the startups, young entrepreneurs, and ecosystem enablers have bookmarked this chat on their YouTube pages. I request Mr. Bagla for a vote of thanks also.
Thank you, Surabhi. And thank you truly, guys. You know, I mean, it's fascinating hearing your stories and how you're taking it forward. And for all of you, just to give you the roadmap, 15th August 2047, we will be 100 years old. I'm sure we'll all be here to celebrate that. And just to put it in perspective, a human resource of 1.6 billion with an average age of about mid-30s, which will make it the youngest on the planet. 21% of the world's workforce will be India. 20% of the world's middle class will be India. The story, as I told you, has just begun. Thank you.